Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting really practical. We're looking at something fundamental to home design, especially here in Australia. We're talking about the hip roof.
Ah, yes, the classic Aussie roof style.
Exactly. You see them everywhere, right? Those elegant sloping sides meeting up. Looks great. But that beauty, that geometry, it hides some real challenges, particularly when you're choosing materials and getting it installed.
That's really our mission today, isn't it? To unpack why this specific roof style needs such precision and why metal, considering our climate, often comes out on top for, well, durability and long-term value.
And we're basing this discussion on some solid groundwork. Our insights today come from a really valuable article we found on the Roofer's website, roofers-au.info, which, for anyone listening, is a pretty useful resource if you're trying to find, licensed, reliable roofers for repairs, replacements, new builds.
All across Australia, yeah. They cover every state and city. And these contractors, they're dealing with these complex hip roofs day in, day out.
So they know the challenges firsthand.
Absolutely. That inherent beauty of the hip roof, the slope on all four sides, which is great for wind resistance, by the way. That's also what makes it tricky for builders. It's not like a simple gable roof, just two sides meeting at a peak.
No, it's much more complex than that if you picture it from afar.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all these intersecting planes, angles everywhere. We call them hips, valleys, ridges.
Right.
The hips are those external angles at the corners. The valleys are the internal channels where slopes meet, directing water flow. Every single one of those points needs incredibly precise cuts, careful flashing, and crucially, a material that can handle those angles without, excessive waste or, worse, compromising the seal against water.
So the homeowner's trying to balance that look, the budget, and wanting something that's going to last for decades. And metal roofing just keeps coming up as the main contender. Why is that, particularly in Australia?
It really boils down to two main things: resilience and weight, or lack thereof. Metal just offers this fantastic mix of durability, a surprising amount of aesthetic choice, and it handles our climate really well.
Okay, let's break that down. Climate resilience.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for a roof?
Well, think about what we throw at our roofs here. Intense UV rays, day after day, which can absolutely destroy some materials.
Yeah, the sun is brutal.
Then you've got torrential downpours that test every single seam and joint, and unfortunately, in many areas, the risk of bushfires. Metal holds up exceptionally well against all three. It doesn't degrade easily under UV, it sheds water efficiently when installed properly, and it has high fire resistance ratings.
And you mentioned weight. That's something people maybe don't think about as much.
They often don't, but it's critical for the structure underneath. Compared to traditional concrete or terracotta tiles, metal roofing is incredibly lightweight.
How much lighter are we talking?
We're talking tons, literally tons less weight sitting on your walls and foundations over the lifetime of the house. Yeah. So that lightweight nature puts significantly less stress on the entire building structure. Especially important on a large, complex hip roof where that load is spread across multiple points. It's genuine peace of mind, structurally speaking, that heavier options just can't offer.
There was a great little example in the source material, wasn't there? Sarah and Mark in regional Victoria.
Yes, that really illustrated the point well. They were replacing an old, tiled hip roof. They went with Colorbond metal, and they loved it for two reasons. One, the huge range of colors meant they could get the modern farmhouse look they wanted.
Okay, aesthetics.
But the real decider for them, living where they do, was the superior bushfire attack level rating, the BAL rating. Knowing your roof itself is a key part of your defense against ember attack during fire season. Well, that's not just style, that's crucial peace of mind.
Now, this brings us nicely to the different types of metal roofing, because it's not just one thing, is it? It's not all, old corrugated tin sheds. The actual profile, the shape of the metal makes a big difference to the look and presumably the performance.
Absolutely. This is where style and substance really intersect. You've got your classic corrugated iron.
The wavy stuff.
Yeah, that undulating profile. It gives you that traditional, almost rustic Aussie charm. If you're restoring an old Federation place in the Blue Mountains, you might go for a heritage green corrugated profile. It just fits.
Right, it looks authentic.
But then you can go completely the other way.
To something much more modern.
Exactly. Standing seam is really popular in contemporary architecture now. We saw mention of an architect, Emily Chen, using it for hip-roofed homes in inner-city Sydney, often in a matte finish Colorbond. Those clean, straight lines of the standing seam profile really emphasize the sharp angles of a hip roof, creates a very sleek, minimalist look.
Okay, so visually quite different.
Yeah.
But you mentioned performance, too. Is standing seam actually better at keeping the weather out than corrugated if they're both, say, Colorbond steel?
That's a really good question. The difference isn't so much the base material, it's how it's put together. It's mechanical. It's all about the fasteners, the screws. With corrugated or other exposed fastener systems, the screws go through the top of the sheet. They sit on the surface. Every single one of those screw heads, with its little rubber washer, is potentially a weak point down the track as that washer degrades over, say, 10, 15 years.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Standing seam uses concealed fasteners. The screws holding one panel down are actually covered by the edge of the next panel, which clips or locks over it.
So the water just can't get to the screw holes.
Precisely. That interlocking system gives you superior protection against water getting in and also against wind uplift, because there are no exposed edges for the wind to catch. That's why it's often seen as the premium choice for maximum durability.
So choosing the right profile is important. But it sounds like even the best material won't perform if it's not installed correctly, especially on these tricky hip roofs.
You've absolutely nailed the critical point there.
Yeah.
Installation expertise. That multifaceted design on those hips, valleys, ridges makes installing metal on a hip roof way more complex than on a simple rectangular gable roof.
More cuts, more angles.
Many more complex cuts, yes. And this is where poor planning or just lack of experience can really cost you financially and potentially structurally too. That complexity directly leads to more material waste. Those diagonal cuts needed to fit the sheets to the hips and valleys inevitably create offcuts.
Right.
If your roofer isn't skilled at planning the layout to minimize that waste on this specific geometry, well, you end up paying for material that just gets thrown away.
How much waste are we talking? Is it significant?
It can be. The estimates suggest a hip roof can generate maybe 10 to 15% more material waste compared to a simply roof shape.
Okay, 10 to 15%. Let's put a number on that. If your roof job is, say, $30,000.
Then that 10 to 15% waste is somewhere between $3,000 and $4,500 worth of metal just going into the bin. That's often the hidden cost if you go with someone who isn't experienced specifically with metal on hip roofs. They might not plan those cuts efficiently.
Which ties into that story about the Brisbane homeowner, doesn't it? They got a quote that seems suspiciously cheap for their complex hip roof.
Yes, exactly. It turned out the initial contractor had really underestimated the time involved, but also, crucially, the amount of material needed once you accounted for the likely waste from all those angled cuts. When they got a second opinion from a specialist roofer, someone who did have that specific experience, the specialist pointed out the need for careful layout planning and meticulous sealing at all the junctions. Their quote was higher, naturally, but it actually reflected the real work needed to ensure that roof would last 50 years, not just look okay for 5. It just highlights why getting a reputable specialized contractor isn't really a luxury for a hip roof. It's kind of essential.
Which brings us squarely to cost, the big comparison. We know metal tends to last longer and handle the climate better, but it costs more upfront, right? Let's tackle that head on. Metal versus, say, asphalt shingles.
Yeah, that's the classic comparison. Shingles definitely have a lower initial cost. You might pay maybe 20%, sometimes even up to 50% less to get shingles installed compared to a metal roof system. Depends on the specific products, of course.
Okay, but up to 50% cheaper. That's a massive difference, especially if you're building new or doing a major reno. For a young family, maybe stretching their budget, is that higher upfront cost for metal really worth it right now?
It's a totally valid question, and the answer forces you to think long-term beyond just the initial invoice. Shingles, particularly in our climate, have known weaknesses. They can lift in high winds, they degrade under that intense UV exposure, they can get moss and algae growth.
So they don't last as long?
Generally, no. In Australia, you're often looking at replacing a shingle roof every 15 to 30 years, sometimes even less in really harsh coastal or high wind areas. So over the 50-plus year life of a typical home, you're likely replacing that shingle roof at least twice, maybe 3 times, and paying for removal, disposal, and new installation each time.
Whereas
Metal flips that completely. You're looking at a lifespan of 40, 50, sometimes up to 70 years, with very little maintenance needed. Plus, you get the better fire resistance, better energy efficiency.
So the higher initial cost is offset over time.
Dramatically offset. While it costs more to put on initially, it's very likely a one-time cost for the entire time you, or even the next generation, own the home.
The Smith family example from Perth really drove that home, didn't it?
It did. Their shingle quote was about 20% lower than the Colorbond metal quote. Seemed cheaper. But when they actually sat down and did a proper 50-year cost analysis factoring in maybe 2 shingle replacements down the line, likely increases in labor costs over time, the metal roof came out, saving them tens of thousands of dollars in the long run.
Wow. Tens of thousands.
Yeah. And that durability factor seems widely understood. That survey mentioned found, what was it, 78% of Aussie homeowners would pick metal over shingles purely for durability reasons. People seem to get the long-term value proposition.
Okay, beyond just not having to replace it, let's talk about those other long-term benefits. Energy efficiency is a big one, especially with our summers.
Absolutely. And this connects back to the low maintenance aspect, too. Metal roofs generally just need a wash down now and then, but the thermal performance is where you see real ongoing savings and comfort improvements.
So how does a metal roof actually keep your house cooler? Is it just because it's thin?
It's more about reflectivity than thickness. Modern metal roofing, especially the lighter colors, think whites, light grays, creams, they're specifically designed with coatings that reflect a large portion of the sun's heat. Solar radiation.
Instead of absorbing it like dark tiles.
Exactly. Think of a dark tile or shingle roof like asphalt on a hot day. It just soaks up the heat. That heat builds up in your roof cavity, your attic space, and then radiates down into your living areas.
Making the air conditioner work harder.
Right. A light-colored metal roof acts more like a mirror, bouncing a lot of that solar heat straight back up, away from the house, so you get less heat transferring into the building in the first place. Which means the house stays naturally cooler and your air conditioning costs can drop noticeably.
And that Adelaide family saw real results.
They did. They reported about a 15% reduction in their cooling costs after they replaced an old dark tile hip roof with a new light-colored Colorbond one.
15% is significant. That adds up summer after summer.
It really does. It's a tangible saving plus just being more comfortable inside.
And briefly, what about sustainability? How does metal stack up there?
Well, longevity is inherently sustainable, right? A product that lasts 50 or 70 years generates less waste than one replaced every 20. But beyond that, many metal roofing products actually contain recycled steel content to begin with. And crucially, at the end of its very long life, a metal roof is 100% recyclable. It doesn't have to end up in landfill like some other materials, so it contributes to a more circular economy in building.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. If someone's listening, maybe considering a new roof or building, what are the key things they should take away about metal on a hip roof?
I think it boils down to maybe 3 main points. First, just sheer durability. Metal offers top-tier protection against the harsh Australian climate. The sun, the rain, the wind, even bushfire risk.
Okay, durability first.
Second, aesthetic flexibility. Despite the complexity of a hip roof, metal profiles like corrugated or standing seam give you real choice. You can match almost any architectural style, from traditional to ultra-modern.
Style options second. And third,
Long-term value. Yes, you'll likely pay more upfront compared to something like shingles, but over the 40, 50, 70-year life of that roof, the savings from minimal maintenance, no replacement costs, and potentially lower energy bills make it a very sound financial investment.
right. The whole life cost, not just the purchase price. And I guess the big action point, coming back to the roofer's website source, is about installation.
Absolutely. Given how tricky hip roofs are with that extra complexity and potential for waste, the clear advice is don't skimp on the installer.
Find someone local, experienced specifically with metal roofing on hip roof geometries.
Exactly. Check their credentials, look at past work on similar roofs. It's not the place to cut corners just to save a bit on the initial quote. That expertise pays off.
Makes perfect sense.
So, maybe a final thought for you to consider. We talk about roofs lasting 40, 50, even 70 years. That's potentially spanning multiple generations living in that home. It makes you think, doesn't it? What level of investment in the quality of that fundamental building material, the roof, really shifts a house from being just a structure that needs constant upkeep towards being a truly durable, lasting, generational asset? Something to ponder next time you admire those classic 4 slopes of a hip roof.